sinister motive for opposing this particular initiative. Is this not an opportunity for us to catch up with the rest of the world? We may think, yes, that we are making headway when compared to many in the region. We are. We may think that this is a response to COVID, and yes, it is. But the fact of the matter is, and many don't like it when we say this, a lost decade left us behind the rest of the world in many instances where we should have embraced remote working a long time ago. And the opportunity for us now to embrace remote working and to use it under the umbrella of a tourism platform is an ideal opportunity that COVID has presented to us. And I think the administration, led by the Prime Minister Mia Moore-Motley, should be commended for taking this opportunity and holding on to it with both hands, because in many instances, Mr. President, we had needed to do initiatives like this for some time. And it is the creativity, it is the willingness to go out front and to make these things happen that has to be commended by this administration, Mr. President. COVID has challenged us in ways that we could not have imagined. And I'll give an example that I am experiencing myself. Before COVID, there were some aspects of what we did, for example, in the Bridgetown port that many people thought could not be digitized. There were many instances where people felt that they had to physically be in front of cargo for the purpose of inspection, what they thought could not have been done. Now COVID comes around and everyone is concerned about their own space, and so we are now remotely interacting with certain aspects of cargo clearances. In some instances as well, even for crew. I heard mentioned in the other place, and I heard it mentioned today by Senator Wiggins about the repatriation of crew members. We, as at today, have repatriated about 22,000 crew members from cruise ships alone, not to mention from cargo ships. And in many of those instances, Mr. President, we did a lot of those transactions remotely. Immigration, for example, in some instances, once upon a time, you had a person who disembarked a vessel, walked through the immigration department, presented themselves physically before the immigration officer, had their documents physically inspected. During COVID, Mr. President, much of that changed out of Senator McConney on digitization and transformation using technology. What are some of the ways in which we work that can now be done remotely, that can allow us to retrain, retool, repurpose, and reposition much of our workforce so that Barbados becomes the Barbados that is fit for purpose in the third decade of the 21st century? What is required of us now? As we prepare, and Senator Nurse mentioned it, as we prepare to welcome visitors to our country, they are not CARICOM skilled workers under the Barbados Accreditation Council requiring a skills certificate. They are not workers requiring a work permit. They are not residents requiring residency. They are tourists. What is required for us to support tourists for a 12-month basis in the same way that we already welcome the snowbirds who come here for 6 months out of every year and spend their time, their resources, and are on our West Coast in particular as differentiated from our South Coast? What is required for Barbados to utilize this new opportunity to drive growth, to transform the future of work, to transform the nature of work, to support labor mobility globally, and also to diversify our tourism product? Mr. President, and I think these are the policy conversations that our government has been having. This is the start, I believe, of these conversations. This is a brilliant new initiative, which I expect to go even further than we have currently contemplated over time, as we're able to see the traction that has already been generated and the mirroring that has taken place in other economies, because it is a fantastic initiative that is meant to transform the way in which we see the world and the way in which the world sees us as a tourism destination. And with these few words, Mr. President, I give my full support to this bill. I thank you.
Thank you. Senator Dr. Rogers.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I rise to lend my voice to the remote employment bill that we're debating here and to commend the government for this initiative. I haven't had the opportunity before to, and deliberately so, to commend the government for the way it has handled the pandemic, as I was giving the senators on the other side the opportunity to do so before I say anything on that matter. But I believe that we ought to be proud as a nation and the government that we have and the personnel that have worked during the time of this pandemic, for our Czar and the Minister of Health, and having done the tremendous job they've done in getting Barbados to the point that it's at. I know when we started on this journey some months ago, we were uncertain about what the outcome would be, and we were dealing with something of which we knew very little, very much like Voltaire's assessment of doctors. Doctors take medicines of which they know little, put into our bodies of which they know less, to cure diseases of which they know nothing. But we started out, sorry, sir. We started out on that journey, and I believe that going with the ebb and flow of everything this virus presented, they have really done a tremendous job. And when we look worldwide at what was possible, how much could have gone wrong, we really ought to be thankful for where we are today. We're not putting our hands up in jubilation, but we're just thankful for where we are today. I wish to say, I don't know if I'm supposed to speak for them or not, but I believe I should. On behalf of religious organizations, thanks to the government for the caution in which they moved to close and reopen religious institutions, because we had seen throughout the world that churches were some of the hot spots for coronavirus, and I think that they were very, very cautious and very caring towards religious organizations, though some may not have thought so, in ensuring that our reputations were protected in the midst of this pandemic. So I wish to thank them for that as well. But equally so, I wish to thank the Barbadian people in general for the discipline exercised during the period. I know you would have had a little party here or there that we heard about. And I can recall over in my side, one day I had to go and talk to the youngsters, poor little ones, little preteens and teenagers just couldn't get away from playing their football. And I had to warn them that they were endangering their elders at home and so on, and they were compliant. So as a nation, we have been very disciplined, and we've gotten to this point. Coronavirus has changed the world, as you've heard just about every senator mentioned this afternoon. And there are some things that will not come back. There are some things that were normal for us that will not be a part of our lives anymore. There are some new things that may become very much a part of our operations. In fact, I think that many persons have now realized that it is possible to work efficiently from home. And I do not have any empirical data other than what persons have said, that some persons have actually saved during the corona period, because you haven't had to commute. You didn't stop at your favorite restaurant that you may have stopped at, your favorite fast food outlet. You cooked at home, and so you realized that you actually saved during the period. And I believe that that is something that would push some persons to want to continue working in that way as well. We cannot assess the government based on results just yet in terms of the initiatives they've had during this COVID-19 period. But what we can do is probably give them an A+ for innovation in terms of the policies that they have sought to put in place to chart us through this period. And this remote employment bill is one such policy. I believe that it is a direction that we can look in. It is an area that we can embrace. But let us also do so recognizing that it will not be the end-all and be-all of our problems, that there are many challenges confronting us, and we have to keep at the forefront that notion of lives versus livelihoods. And there are times when we'll have to make decisions based on procuring livelihoods, but there are other times when we'll have to make decisions on safeguarding lives. I've said that to say that along with the 3 F's that Senator McConney mentioned, the focusing and fast and being flexible, there's also a C, caution. That we have to be very cautious in this period as we look in other directions on how we can stimulate tourism and economic activity in our country. There's one thing that we need to be very cognizant of. Yes, we have managed to flatten the curve here in Barbados, but worldwide, COVID-19 is in its embryonic stages. It is escalating every day. And you've heard from Senator Greenidge and I believe Senator Nurse and some others that we have to be cautious about who we allow in. This is a time when we cannot take any chances whatsoever with the populace of Barbados. Neither can we allow ourselves to be harmed by the ineptitude of others. You know, we have done what was necessary here to safeguard our people, and we have to make sure that our people are at the forefront of everything we do. As I mentioned at the start of the debate on this pandemic, Barbados is one of the vulnerable areas in this world because we have an aged population, and as we would have highlighted some time before, we have a high rate of chronic communicable diseases. And we have to be extremely cautious about how we go about bringing people in and how they move around in our space as well. And that is something I wish to speak on at another time, but I believe that we have to be very cautious and take the hard decisions, because one of the things that we have to pay close attention to here is that we have seen what happened from 2001, 2008, 2020. We cannot remain so vulnerable to the world. We have to start building up resilience within. And if that means that one generation has to sacrifice for the sake of others, it just so happens that we may have to be that generation. Over the time, you would have heard me said, we have to make more than 3-year plans. We have to look somewhere 20, 25 years down the road and decide that, I'm going to use a Bajan term here, if we have to suck salt now, at least our children will be better off later on. And so I believe that this is still an opportunity to press the reset button. It is still an opportunity for us to look within and build a type of resilience. Yes, we'll always need the world. We'll always be dependent upon aspects of the world, but I believe that there's much more that can be done within to strengthen our resolve and strengthen our structures from within to help us to cushion some of the effects of these global shocks that we have been experiencing from time to time. I think this one has shown us how vulnerable we are. This one has shown us how easily things can fall apart. And so, while I support this bill, I want to remind us that this is not a cure-all, it is an avenue. We then have to look at other areas. in which we can make our country more resilient and make our country stronger. But again, it comes back to lives versus livelihoods, and sometimes we have to safeguard lives. And so with those few words, sir, I wish to support this bill.
We next hear from Senator Grant.
Thank you, Mr. President. And maybe I should start by reflecting on some words that Senator Cummings made. Not getting in too deep into the speech yet, because I do have to allow some time for Senator Franklin to make it to the members' room to sit and listen to, yes, yeah, we know that. The Northernmost comments certainly reinforce that. So I'll give Senator Franklin the time that he needs to get to the members' room. But Mr. President, Senator Cummings did indicate and reference a question in her presentation. And that question was, what are we doing to move away from tourism? And she would have made reference to a study that was done. And I start with that because, Mr. President, I've said in this chamber before, and I want to reinforce it again, that while there has been a lot of talk continuously about the need to diversify and the need to look at other aspects of the economy and look at other industries, the reality is that when you look at it in a realistic way, the truth is there are not a lot of other areas that we can really look at to give us the kind of benefit that we want as it relates to tourism. And I'm going to spend a little time today, Mr. President, just reflecting on tourism, the importance of tourism, and where we are and why this piece of legislation is extremely important. Sir, you know, the last few months has clearly demonstrated how very important tourism is to the Barbados economy. Numerous farmers, numerous beauticians. In fact, sir, you know, when you are getting a familiarity with tourism, we sometimes, sir, display what we call a tourism tree. And it's what we do, sir, is that we have this big pictorial representation of a tourism tree. And the roots of the tree, the roots represent the different visitors that come from the different source markets. And then you have the trunk of the tree, where you have the different monies with respect to the different areas of expenditure that you have, whether it be the hotels, whether it be the tourism, the planning, the human resource development. That represents the trunk. And then you go to the branches, and the branches have construction. The branches have boutiques. The branches have buses, taxi operations. I mean, it is the wide number of areas that are touched, sir, coaches, entertainment, local agriculture, food and beverage, shopping. The magnitude of the different areas that tourism tree touches really is significant, and it really signals the very, very deep and integral part that tourism plays within the Barbados economy. And when you look at the pictorial representation of the tree as well, you also see the area with respect to the earning of foreign exchange. You see the area with respect to investment, and of course, you see the area with respect to employment. And I reference on those things because, Mr. President, I think that there is not always the clear understanding of the importance of tourism to the Barbados economy. and the importance of tourism to the day-to-day well-being and the lives of Barbadians. Of course, sir, with respect to that tree, it needs to be watered. And in that pictorial representation, you will see what looks like a watering can. And with respect to the watering can, you will see reference being made to research and development and marketing and promotion. And I think, sir, that one of the things that we need to ensure that we are able to do is to educate persons more about the importance of tourism and the importance of tourism to the economy and how the economy works generally. I start at that point because I think, sir, that it is very critical and important to understand. The truth is that with literally the overnight halt in the tourism industry, there have been severe economic implications for Barbadians. I looked, while sitting here today, I was looking at an entity with which I'm associated and as a director, and looking at the projections in terms of the revenue in comparison to 2019. There has been a 50% reduction. And let me say that that is only today, because what is likely to happen is that if we don't get things up and running and get things working, then the implications with respect to that kind of impact is likely to be a lot greater. So there are implications, sir, with respect to the economy, implications with respect to businesses, implications with respect to households, implications with respect to individuals. And we have to find a way to get the economy working again. And I do understand the concerns that persons have in terms of the opening of the country and to whoever is coming into the country. But I think government has done a good job in being able to balance between the issues that relate to health and those issues that relate to the economy. And I believe that the government should be complimented in that regard. Mr. President, you know that this is not an easy exercise. It really could not be an easy exercise. The government has developed a number of protocols that deal with the issues relating to how persons move around. They deal with the issue of the re-entry into the country. Government has identified certain countries as being high risk, medium risk, low risk. There are different policy positions that have been taken with respect to those areas. And I think by and large that those protocols have been very good protocols developed. There have been protocols with respect to the operation of bars, with respect to accommodation, respect to water sports operations, with respect to restaurants, all of the areas in which there is activity and interaction of people. And the one thing that we can say is that the government of Barbados has been very responsible in the manner in which it has sought to deal with the issue and the impact of COVID-19. The government of Barbados has followed the science and at the same time has sought to ensure that the most vulnerable in our society, that they are protected. But Sari started by referencing tourism and referencing the tourism tree. And I want to go back to a point that I made some time earlier, and that relates to airlift. The reality is, sir, that you cannot have a viable tourism industry if you don't have international transport, if you don't have planes coming into the destination, and if you don't have the cruise ships coming. Now, my understanding is, and Senator Cummings can speak in greater detail with respect to the cruise ships, but my understanding is that the cruise business is not likely to come back before December or January, that you will not see arrival of cruise ships coming before that. Normally during the summer period, cruise ships do reposition to the Mediterranean. This time, that is not being done, and there is a desire for the cruise ship business to come back in December and in January. The expectation is that we will see some benefits coming from that. And I think the government has taken a very responsible position in the manner in which the government has been communicating with the cruise lines. Senator Cummings would have spoken to the different repatriation numbers with respect to the crew that was here and the crew that is being accommodated here. A very responsible manner. The government of Barbados has taken the position that Barbadians would not be denied entry in their own country. And I think, sir, that is a very responsible position to take. But, sir, as I speak about tourism and as I speak about the airlift, I said in this chamber before that the airlift was significantly reduced. And I said at that time that my estimation was that we had in the vicinity of 1 million seats coming into Barbados every year. But I thought after saying that it was important for me to go and do some research. So I went and I did some research, sir. And in 2019, there were 2.7 million seats coming into Barbados. 2.7 million seats coming into Barbados. And we can take out of that about 140,000 seats in relation to air-sea transfers. Right? So there would have been about 2.6 million seats coming into Barbados. And I reference this, sir, because I want persons to understand the magnitude of the challenge that we have. Here's a situation where the tourism industry is the lifeblood of the economy. Here's a situation where now the airlift has been significantly impacted because we have moved from a position where we would have had in the past on a yearly basis 2.5 million seats coming in, which is around 50,000 seats a week, if the mathematics is correct. And we have a situation now where you're looking at about 2,000 seats a week coming in. Let me make the point as well, sir, that those 2,000 seats are not all coming at the same time. We are seeing those seats come over a period of time. Where in the past, sir, you would have had, at this time of the year, British Airways operating with at least 7 flights, could be as many as 9 flights a week, but at least 7 flights. You now have 1 flight coming a week. Where in the past Air Canada would have been operating daily, you now have 2 flights coming a week. And let me say to the chamber, sir, that there was a situation where the flight, I believe, for tomorrow on Air Canada, I believe it's this Thursday, that the flight was cancelled. The flight was cancelled because there was not enough business going north. And I reference that to say that while we have been able to talk about this airlift and while it is agreed that this is the airlift that will be coming back, the reality is that that can change. And therefore, I think that the government must be complimented in the manner in which it is sought to go about and to seek to ensure that we have persons coming into Barbados, being able to stay in Barbados, being able to work in Barbados, and being able to contribute to the economy, because that is vitally important. I have a friend, sir, that him and we were having a discussion about assisting some people. And he said to me, Rudy, you must have cash to care. So you're going to have cash to care. And the reality is that I'm sure many of us, if not all of us in this chamber, during this period would have assisted persons that need assistance, vulnerable families, vulnerable individuals. But the reality is that you do need some cash to care. And if we are therefore going to ensure that we are able to save the most vulnerable, and that we are able to keep the economy going, and that we are able to secure Barbados' future, we have to get some economic activity going. That is critical, sir, and that is very important. I believe, Mr. President, that Barbados has all of the right attributes for working remotely. Some of them, though, we may need to improve on. We have political stability. We have a good healthcare system. The telecommunications, generally speaking, is good, but at times there are some challenges, and the providers may need to look to enhance that. Because I do have to say that while we can talk about this program, we have to make sure that the expectations that people have, that those expectations are met when they come here. So we cannot have a situation where persons are encouraged to come here and to work remotely, and then there are challenges with telecommunications or with utilities or anything of the like. So I think it is very, very important that we enhance in those areas where we have to enhance. But the overall experience, I believe, sir, will be very positive and will be very good. We have attributes related, of course, to the culinary experience, and attributes, of course, related to the sun, sea, and sand, which is still very, very important. So, Mr. President, I support very, very strongly this Barbados work stamp. I think that it is extremely important. Sir, from the time this was first mentioned by the Prime Minister, there has been significant talk about it throughout the globe. It has been on in newspapers. People within the United Kingdom have communicated with me and told me that it has been in the UK newspapers and sent clippings. It's been on television, some of the bigger networks. It has been on social media. And I'm told, sir, that there would have been about, I think it was about 4,900 already communications that would have been through the BTMI with respect to this work program and the interest that people have in the program. I should inform the chamber, sir, that many BHTA members, their representatives in the source markets, are saying that there is a lot of interest with respect to this remote program, and that the Barbados Work Stamp is something that they are interested in knowing a bit more about. And therefore, it is the desire that once this bill passes through today, and I'm very hopeful and optimistic that that will happen, that we can then start in working with the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. to fashion the appropriate marketing to start to entice persons to come here and to work remotely. So the development of an appropriate marketing campaign is appropriate and very relevant in relation to that. Sir, you know, I've heard some comments made in relation to the definition of terms. And I'm not going to spend very long talking about that, but I'm going to relate a couple things that occurred with me, or that I've been exposed to. Sir, when I was a youngster in my teens, I felt then that persons different to me should not function and should not exist. That's how I felt. I was then young and giddy-headed, I guess. But now that I'm at this age, in my young old age, I look at things a little different. Don't let me call for the Bible now. Don't let me reference a page. Let me go straight, sir. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But now I've become a man, I put away childish things. I believe that I have it right. Those who are versed in the Bible can tell me if I'm correct or not. The point that I'm making, sir, is that I think you have to become more tolerant and look at things from a different perspective in a more mature and responsible manner. Mr. President, in 2015-16, when I was the Chief Executive Officer of the Grenada Tourism Authority, I participated in a promotion in the United States. And I did what I thought was a very good presentation in relation to Grenada as a tourism destination and speaking to all of the attributes and all of that. And when I was finished, I asked if there were any questions. And one of the tour operators, a travel agent, got up and he asked, does Grenada welcome people from my community? And he said that I am a gay travel agent. Do they welcome people from our community? I waited for the minister to answer. I was standing, and the minister didn't answer. And the answer I gave to that travel agent, I could say here in relation to the same aspect with respect to this issue. We do not ask, sir, when persons book a trip, we don't ask your sexual orientation. When people book a trip, we don't ask you what is your education or anything like that. We open our arms and we welcome you, but we do require you to follow the laws of Barbados. And that's the point. And I think, sir, that what is happening, that there are some people who, are throwing up a little smoke screen. They want to divert from what is really a very good policy. In the heart, sir, they know that it's a good policy. In the heart, sir, they know that it's an innovative policy. In their heart, sir, they know that it's a policy that will help to take Barbados forward. But for their own political, personal, and I wouldn't use that word in the chamber. But for reasons known best to them, they can't come up, sir, and wholeheartedly support it. But the reality is that this measure before the chamber is one, sir, that is very significant and one that should be given full support by all of us. Mr. President, I am very happy to stand here in support of this bill. It demonstrates that the government of Barbados is thinking outside the box. It demonstrates that we have a prime minister who is thinking outside the box and is not simply just, talking words. The country may have become somewhat accustomed in the past to a prime minister that never said anything or never acted or functioned or took the lead. We are fortunate, Mr. President, that we have a prime minister, and sometimes I wonder, where does she get the energy? I really wonder. Sometimes, sir, I may send a message, and the discussions that you have, the prime minister is always thinking, always on the ball, always looking to find ways in which she could improve the lot of Barbadians and to ensure that our lives are not in any way complicated. I think, sir, that has to be commended. And I've said that organizations tend to take on the character of the leader. And the truth is that in this country, we have a leader in the prime minister that is very focused, very determined, very committed, very hardworking, and prepared to take all of the actions necessary to deal with the environment that we are in, but also to ensure that there's a better Barbados and that there is a Barbados for future generations. There was a time, sir, when there was talk about Barbados being a failed state, even in these very challenging times, that did not exist then. When there was talk about the possibility of Barbados being a failed state, you don't hear people saying that now. You don't hear people saying it because there is confidence in the leadership. And when I say the leadership at this time, I'm not only speaking, sir, to the Prime Minister, because I think that the Minister of Health has done a fantastic job. I think it's a team effort. Everyone is doing a fantastic job. But I think what is also very critical and important is that the person who is leading is making sure that she is marshalling all of the troops and that no one is sleeping on the job. Mr. President, sir, I give this bill my full support. I'm obliged to you.
Senator Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. President. Normally, Senator Grant follows my usually short contribution, so coming after him is a unique opportunity to be able to give my side, and I must thank him for a very robust presentation. It was somewhat enthralling as he led us through the skilled practice of swaying those who are observing such an eloquent speaker, Mr. President. My philosophy, sir, of course, is that it's better to debate a question without settling it than to settle a question without debating it. So perhaps, as I rise from this independent spectrum, we ought to examine both sides of the argument and see where we land in terms of this proposed legislation, Mr. President. What I did notice, though, was that there was a lot of reference to the concept of tourism and that this fell within the ambit. But, Mr. President, we will be aware that tourism itself is defined by traveling for pleasure. And the purpose of this stated legislation is to facilitate non-nationals who work remotely from Barbados for a period of 12 months. And I think, sir, that while not moving away or in any means taking away from the contribution made by other members of this honorable House, perhaps will aid in the interpretation of the purpose of the legislation, sir. For my part, in arguing the side of the positive or the proposition, sir, I believe it is innovative. I believe, Mr. President, that it shows a thinking government trying to find a solution to an existing problem. How do we encourage persons to the country to bring what we hope are the attendant benefits? Mr. President, it has moved quite quickly from inception or conception, sir, to here we are dealing with implementation. And it's interesting, but that will be a topic for another debate, how it has worked its way from a concept into what it may soon become in terms of reality. Mr. President, the global coverage has been very, very impressive, and I think it only stands to benefit our island the more that persons hear about it and are interested in taking part in its offering. And it can be described as action. Something is being done, and in these circumstances, sir, we believe that you need to take these positive steps to seek to find solutions in these times. It was very comforting to hear that what is provided can be revoked, and it gives us some comfort that should there be persons who seek to utilize this opportunity for nefarious means, that we will have some element of control. And I'll speak to that shortly, Mr. President. A matter of fact, sir, I so value what we have here that I have the audacity to stand here before my fellow members and say we should charge more. Market prices should not be a factor in determining the product that we in Barbados have. And I think we need to be cognizant of what we have to offer persons who seek to have 12 months in this beautiful isle of ours, Mr. President. Sir, support has been enthusiastic from the players in the sector, those involved in the real estate and the hospitality industry, as well as the attendant service providers. Maybe, sir, this would encourage skill sharing by persons who come to the jurisdiction with some unique skill set, and as hinted by Senator Dr. Springer, perhaps there will be resulting IT infrastructural development and support to accommodate these persons. So certainly there are many bases on which this legislation can be praised. But in seeking to come to the balance, sir, we also need to look at the arguments for the opposition, and not opposition, of course, in the political party sense, Mr. President, but in the debating term, Mr. President. And that is that for all the good intentions, there are several factors which would cause one to pause, which I believe, Mr. President, we would all benefit from articulating and encouraging debate. You see, Mr. President, this concept that you ought not to criticize, while it has its place in a very limited sphere, does not necessarily resound to the best result. I think we have all benefited when we have had persons who have offered constructive criticism. And maybe it's how that criticism is presented, Mr. President, that results in whether it's up or whether it is refused. Someone once told me, sir, it's the bedside manner of the doctor, not necessarily the skill of the practitioner, which results in the patient's acceptance. But, sir, in terms of the potential negatives, the first one that came to mind is, of course, the potential abuse by those seeking to skirt our work permit regulations. A concept which could be utilized is if I have a company in Barbados by the name of ABC. ABC BVI Inc. can be incorporated like that, sir. And ABC BVI Inc. can have someone who says, I'm going to Barbados to work for the 12-month period, while still providing services to ABC in Barbados. These are the type of the legal shenanigans, sir, that we would hope the government will have the resources and the vigilance to prevent the abuse. Sir, there are those who are concerned about the COVID risk and the fears as expressed by Senator Dr. Rogers, sir. And of course, the simple reality is, sir, that this is an attractive option as long as we remain relatively COVID-free. If we drop our guard, we will suddenly find that those who are clamoring to enter suddenly grow silent. Another factor to consider, Mr. President, is the true cost of having such a worker. In other words, there is the cost which, and I would defer to those who utilize the proper terms, Senator Nurse and Senator Drakes, the concept of an already burdened infrastructure which we have in the island, and the utilization by that infrastructure of persons who are not paying taxes, while there is an element of consumption tax that they are contributing to, is that consumption tax and the very, I will say, low fee enough to make up for the utilization costs in terms of the infrastructure, roads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that already, and healthcare, we are seeing suffering from need of taxpayers' dollars, which of course is reduced in these times, Mr. President. And while we stand here in this chamber, and Mr. President, just a bit of a digress, you know, this concept of senators and what they do, it would be interesting, Mr. President, if you were to ever venture in social media, that despite what we may believe, we are classified as one by the public. There is no divide inside these halls. So when recent legislation was passed, I saw a young man say, I don't know what them senators in there doing. And I say that to say this, we need to be aware that when actions are being viewed by the public, there are some who don't take the time to distinguish the different actors. But on that point, I raise that to say, Mr. President, the fact is that we recognize, while we have evolved as a society and as individuals, and what might be an individual position as opposed to a government position, there are persons in the society who the concept of what is a partner has a more traditional bearing. And those persons, as Barbadians, have a right to have their voices heard, and whether or not they are happy or discontent, an ear should be given while understanding that not necessarily we will be acting in the interests of an individual. We have to do actions that are in the best interest of the country and recognize our core beliefs, Mr. President. So while there's also the issue of those who may be concerned about what is socially acceptable and what may be impacted and what is Barbadian in 2020, that's another factor. And that's a factor which comes after in terms of the government's determination of how it will deal with the scenario. I say no more on that at this time, Mr. President. Sir, there are some who will argue that this is an example of trickle-down economics, where the aim is that by these persons who come in, that there will be some benefit to those lower down on the economic ladder for services they may need. But the immediate beneficiaries would be those who have the benefits of having properties and other amenities which will be consumed by these persons. So whether the benefit for the small man in this, and I assume that that would be addressed in due course, Mr. President. And then, of course, as hinted by Senator Nurse, we have seen that there's a phrase, sir, Mr. President, let me not, they say the devil works hard, but a certain reality star works harder. And we have a situation, Mr. President, where any tax incentive which is gained by individuals who are allowed to work outside of their jurisdiction for an entire year will be quickly neutered. And the question is, are we prepared for the attendant backlash or the attendant adjustments that we ourselves will have to prepare for when that comes home, Mr. President. So we must be mindful of what we reap by this which we sow. But sir, after we point out the positive and after we consider the negative, I believe this is legislation which we should support as the government is trying. I think someone described it, I can't remember the source, as it is a case of leadership where we are entering into a dark room and the leadership is trying to find its way slowly. And that's what we're doing. No one knows what the future holds in regular times, much less in the age of COVID-19, Mr. President. And at the end of the day, once we maintain the control as we have, and let me join in echoing the support of the government for how it's handled the COVID-19 pandemic, this is something which will hopefully redound to the benefit of Barbados and which has my support. But Mr. President, You know, when I saw this legislation, I got excited because I saw the title when it popped up in the email, as we all get them now. Mr. President, you see how we evolved, Mr. President? There was a time there was a motorcycle and paper wrapped up, Mr. President, by which your order paper was delivered. Now you get the ping and you observe the email as to what is coming at you. Yes, Mr. President. So when I saw this turn up in my inbox and I saw Remote Employment Act, I got excited. I say, well, all right, we're dealing with, how we can structure employees who are working from home in Barbados, safe working environment, more law for lawyers to argue, so I'm hoping that is coming. And I'm hoping to see guidelines issued or the relevant legislation issued to support employers and employees in these times. The fact is you have persons working at home. I can say that we have worked and advised in regard to drafting working from home policies. But the questions which would arise from these policies is, of course, liability, resources, and potential issues which relate to having to provide service. An example, Mr. President, is it that you are working from home, and I've raised this concept already, Mr. President. Picture that we are in an employment right tribunal hearing, and there is a dispute as to whether you or the person you're representing has been working adequately during this COVID period. And the defense that is mounting is it was a pandemic. I am trying to stay safe and take care of my family. I am sorry that Mr. Boyce wanted 12 reports done during this period. I could only do 2. What is a reasonable expectation of an employer and an employee during this time? What is the reasonable expectation for an employee who is working at home, and what is the reasonable expectation as to support or communication, Mr. President? So that is the type of legislation I thought we were going to debate, but I am pretty sure that it will be coming sooner rather than later, Mr. President. And this leads me to the other point, sir. Where are the standing order adjustments to allow us to make these contributions virtually? Why must we, and I have no problem attending, but I am very concerned about Snow's honor. Why must Senator Franklin be here if he does not wish to be here with us and he can make his contributions virtually? Other jurisdictions have done it. It will take a simple, let me not posit that. I believe, sir, it is something which the legislation can readily adapt. We have the resources, we have the technology, and we have not the ingenuity, sir, to bring it forward. How can we be debating remote working without discussing remote working with regard to the parliamentary services? Just a thought, Mr. President, and it's something which is within our ambit to do, sir. We have so many persons making their contribution in different spheres. They do not physically need to be in the building, Mr. President, I submit, to make those contributions. In conclusion, sir, but there's one more point. But in closing, sir, this is legislation I support. As always, once we monitor and once we see how we implement, we will succeed. But if it is subject to abuse and if we do not keep control of our COVID numbers, sir, it would be for naught. And finally, sir, I think that this is an appropriate time to say whether the Caribbean regionalists, now is the time when we see our neighbors to the north struggling, that we perhaps should be looking even harder at the regional economic integration, support, and reliance in this time as to whether we will be the tourists for each other, we will be the ones who provide the service, we will be the ones who provide the goods, and we will be the ones who provide the market. Is that not something that we should be looking at quickly at this time? Now we recognize, and I remember the initial discussions with regard to the concept of a CARICOM bubble, and it sounded very nice, but then we saw that certain jurisdictions took their own lead on that. But let's not lose hope, and let us continue to hold hands with our regional brothers and sisters and find a solution to this problem. Mr. President, I support this legislation. I hope my exercise of arguing both sides is understood, and let us move forward and get on with the people's business in a safe manner. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Boyd. Senator Tate, it is now your chance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this afternoon it has been an interesting debate that we've had. This legislation is the result of what we have all been referring to as our new normal. It has derived from what we have all been exposed to in the sense of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the government has seen it fit to devise those, I would say, rescue pieces of legislation in an effort to address a lot of the issues that have arisen, in particular as it relates to our economy, our tourism, our people. The bill before us, sir, Senator McConney, when she rose, she spoke of there's fear. We need to be focused, flexible, and fast. And as much as I would have been one in the past to complain about legislation that comes to the Senate too quickly, in the instant case, especially with the perceived competition that has reared its head, the various heads, I understand the concept behind the bill. I understand the need to move quickly, fast. I believe I understand what the government is trying to achieve. But for me, sir, and I don't say but to say that I do not support the bill or I'm opposed to the bill. I have what I would say direct or indirect concerns that come with this bill. And so I propose this afternoon to raise my concerns, and by doing so, seek clarity with certain areas. And I am going to, unlike Senator Rogers, who used C in terms of his caution, I propose to continue with the F theme, not as a means of a failing grade, but I'm going to piggyback on Senator McConney's use of F. My first concern is that as we debate this bill, we've had the czar, together with the cabinet, having to come to the country and issue a very stern final warning. My first F. Final warning. Why did we need a final warning, Mr. President? Because we have people in the country who have been flouting the protocols. You keeping up, y'all? Second F. But the flouting is not a joke, Mr. President, because we have to be right in order to be encouraging visitors in. Because the facts are that the statistics show that we have COVID by importation. So, we as a people, following the direction of the government, and in particular the leadership of the Minister of Health and Wellness, who I gonna clap for. He is to be commended. in his quest to encourage us not to retreat and not to surrender, he came forward, and the Prime Minister and other government officials, and said, this is how we are going to do it. This is who we are. We are going to wear masks, we're going to sanitize our hands, and we are going to social or physical distance ourselves from each other. So I'm going to see my friends, and I'm not going to hug. I'm going to bounce. I'm going to bow. I'm going to wave. We get to a point where we are at zero, and all of a sudden, everybody gone mad. There's something fundamentally flawed. 2S one time. Y'all at what number? 5. Thank you, Senator Boyce. With that. Fundamentally flawed with that, Mr. President. And I'm wearing this mask because I was directed by the Honorable Clerk of Parliament that I should speak with the mask on, and as much as it fretting me, I'm going to wear it. To make the point, we cannot wait till now to be ignoring the protocols that have been put in place by the powers that be. It is ridiculous. And I, for one, am furious. Because if I am following the protocols, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and I'm trying to make sure that I live, and that the person next to me lives, because we don't know if we're asymptomatic unless we've gone for a test. We don't know. So we need to be our brother's keeper or sister's keeper. So I am confused or flummoxed at the concept of people waiting till we get to this point to flout the protocols. And of concern to me, Mr. President, is the fact that from what you're seeing on social media, some of the persons who are flouting these protocols are persons who should know better, who are in high-ranking positions, who are officials in high places. We no longer have a media where it is just a newspaper, so that if a picture doesn't look good, you can move that picture and put another. We have the type of media where we're getting real-time communication. So if you are caught doing something wrong, it's going to make social media, even if it doesn't make the newspaper. We have to lead by example. We cannot continue to have situations where persons in charge are seen in the public domain having close and personal conversations without a mask on, with people who have their mask at their chin or below. The exposure is present. I, for one, am concerned. We are opening our borders to persons. We're saying, come, work here. I get it. But not to our detriment. Every person who comes here under this bill will require interaction with potentially all of us in here, even if it's to be in the same supermarket. But what about the people in the tourism industry who will be cleaning for them, washing for them, interacting with them, shopping for them, babysitting for them? We need to follow the protocols. And it offends me that I could see on social media at a restaurant, hundreds of persons and not a mask in sight. That offends me. It offends me to see people at the opening of or the reopening of a restaurant, no mask in sight. Or the only persons that have on the mask are the servers. But if you are the person without the mask and you are the person with the disease, what are you doing? You're putting these people at risk. Then they go home and they put their family at risk. Then they come and see me as a client and put me at risk. We need to be setting proper examples for our people. We have a situation in this country where if certain people do it, it is so. If they see certain people doing certain things, it's the law. It doesn't matter what is written. So the persons in high places need to pay attention. They need to stick to the protocols that in some cases, some of them helped to draft. Mind you, I say to the Tsar and the monitoring team. Forward march. Whoever you have to shut down, shut down. That's how I feel. Because we are not introducing anything new, and I recognize that what I'm doing is so wrong. I'm touching up my mask. I acknowledge it. I will sanitize my hands when I'm finished. Forward march, go ahead. And I was again flummoxed. Are you using it again? No, not flummoxed. Let's use frazzled. To read that there is a voice in the private sector suggesting that you don't go to immediate shutdown, but you give people warning, and then another chance. And who's supposed to police that? And why are we giving people warnings for protocols that have been established from day one? What the czar spoke about was nothing new. Social distance, wear your mask, and sanitize. So why you need a warning to do what we have been doing from day one? Why you need a warning to do what allowed us to go to zero? No. We have to be a more responsible people. And we have to be a more responsible country. And we have to move from talk to action and enforcement if necessary. Because this is no joke. There are facts that have been reported. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The fact is that it has been reported that we have a second strain of COVID that is worse than the one that we have been exposed to. Mr. President, I have heard about the Harrison Point facility. I have heard certain eminent medical professionals refer to it as the Harrison Point Hotel. Mr. President, that is one hotel I do not wish to get to know. I don't want to go there. I don't want to experience it. I really don't. Notwithstanding the high-level care you will get, the high-level staff you are going to be exposed to, I would rather not ever experience Harrison Point. Therefore, it behoves us to make sure that while we deal with lives and livelihood, that we make sure that we are paying proper attention to our lives. And those persons who are irresponsible, are reckless, and frankly full of foolishness need to be fixed. Oh, wait, I take that back. Need to be flogged. Thank you, Senator Holder. Not physically, though. While we are dealing with those persons who are breaching the protocol, sir, I have just a few other things that I'm seeking clarity about. And in particular, it has to do with the whole issue of quarantine. We have the 72-hour PCR test that persons are being called upon to have when they get here. And when they get here and it's negative, I've asked, and I'm not sure if I've had an answer, so I don't know if I will get the answer today or it's something that will be looked at. But what happens to the persons who are bringing the PCR that is negative? Then they go into the community. Are they to be tested again? And if they're to be tested again, how do you get them back? And if they're to be tested again, what do they do while they wait to be tested? Are they under lock and key at a facility? And if so, how is that managed? How is that policed? If they don't have the test and they have to be tested here, what happens to them while they're waiting to be tested? Where do they go? How are they managed? Are they into the public? Are we exposed to them if they happen to come and go shopping at the same grocery that we shop at to buy their supplies while they're here for their 7 or 10 days? To me, that's a little fuzzy. And I would like to understand that as it relates to the quarantine and the exposure to all of us and those persons who will be working directly with them, be it cleaning, transportation, babysitting, whatever the case may be. So in that regard, I would like a little more clarity. And I think I'm not alone there when I say that that is a question that has been on the lips of a number of persons in terms of that gray or fuzzy area as it relates to quarantine. Mr. President, in terms of the persons who will be coming here, I believe that the bill addresses that which needs to be addressed. It was fast, it's effective, so be it. I, for one, hope that, as the minister constantly says, the situation as it relates to COVID is dynamic, it's fluid, and I understand that. I do hope, however, that while and in the process of focusing on the livelihoods of persons, that there will be a refocused position on how we are to deal with these breaches of the protocols so that we can take it back to where it was and to the level that it was. It cannot be right that we are going places and we're hearing stories of people not using hand sanitizers anymore. We're hearing stories of people not doing this temperature. We're hearing stories of people not wearing the mask. And then you're getting cursed because you don't want to deal with somebody who is not wearing a mask. We still have people in stores who, if you want to use your debit or credit card, want to take it from you. They want to touch up this and touch up that. No, Mr. President, we need to get back on track as it relates to the protocols. If not, we can be opening ourselves to a terrible situation by virtue of allowing people in. Barbados is a paradise regardless. For some people, it may be a haven. But we want it to be a haven in a positive way, not people running from where they are to come here to spread anything other than joy. I pray that the monitoring team, the czar, the ministry, the government will be able to fix things and refocus and get back on track so that we can move forward. With those few words, Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Senator McConnell.
Mr. President, thank you for allowing me to close this debate. And I'd wish to start by saying thank you to all of the honorable members of this House who have given their contributions. And I'm happy to see that we have a full House of persons who are in support, albeit some people have expressed their concerns. And certainly those concerns are to be treated in a manner that's due. As is normal, there are some concerns that I will certainly seek to respond and provide some clarification to. In particular, there was a matter raised earlier by Senator Franklin about the people coming in and bringing in all kinds of communicable diseases. I believe that Senator Grant addressed that partially in making the point that we normally welcome tourists to Barbados, all kinds of tourists, but we don't ask them to declare every single disease that they have, and that this is a tourism. This is a tourism initiative, and that we are not at this time going to be asking them to do that. However, I would want to draw attention to the part of the bill that indicates that persons who are coming in under this would need to provide proof that they have valid health insurance so that they do not become a burden on the system here, whether they get sick here or they are sick and need to be attended to. So do know that we have thought about this and we have made sure that we do not violate people's privacy in ways that would not be necessary at this time, and that we have put things in place to ensure that they do not become a burden on the taxpayers should they become ill at this time. Another point that was raised was with regards to doing checks and making sure that all and sundry and perhaps those who are of the unsavory character, paraphrasing, would not be allowed to enter this country, etc. I do want to, again, reassure the members of this chamber and others who may be listening that Barbados is indeed being responsible in terms of vetting those persons who are applicants. The GRCC, which is the Joint Regional Communication Center, which has responsibility for looking after regional security. The Barbados government will be working in collaboration with GRCC in terms of vetting. And of course, you have to know that when persons send the advance information, which you would see included on the application forms, as part of the vetting, the information is scrubbed against both internal and international security systems such as Interpol and others. So just reassuring that indeed we are considering those risks and mitigating to the best of our ability. And I want to add at this point, I did mention in my presentation that even if we approve someone and we later discover something, the minister has the right to revoke. And so therefore there is no entitlement to this. It has to be approved. They must go through a vetting process. And should there be something that comes up after the vetting process, that can be revoked. And so I just want to give that assurance. Also, there were some comments made by three persons, I believe, three members, honorable members of the House with regards to price and whether we're competitive or not. The simple answer to that is Barbados has chosen to be a trendsetter. We have chosen not to follow the market. Therefore, when you are at the head of the market, you don't really and truly, you are going out there setting the trends and you are setting your prices and other things to suit whatever we consider to be acceptable. What is happening is when you're entering something innovative, you are among the first in the world to do it, you're going to have to implement, and then you learn and you change and you adapt just like any other business opportunity that's out there in the world. And so I would want us as Barbadians not to be afraid to be innovators, because innovators mean that is new. You never did it before. You may do some things wrong, and our whole attitude has to change, Mr. President, from that of success or failure to that of success and learning. And that is how we are going to have to adjust in a world where we have to innovate and we have to change, you have to make transitions at speed. I also heard this call from many, and I want to just answer it generally with regards to who comes in and who does not. And I just want to share that Barbados does business with the world. And we have welcomed the world to Barbados through tourism and business and other means for several years, and we've done so successfully. We are signatory as a country to human rights agreements that stand on the principle of non-discrimination and on equality in terms of how we apply the rights and freedoms to which everyone in this world are entitled as human beings. And Barbados, having signed on to those agreements and believing strongly in that principle of non-discrimination, we will continue in that vein, as we have heard the Prime Minister say, to respect the international agreements while taking the time at the appropriate time, as the Prime Minister outlined, to look at the local situation as it relates to those other matters. I also want to speak and say thank you to Senator Greenidge for making the point in his presentation that this remote employment bill presents no threat, no harm, no foul to Barbadians. And there is therefore no need for Barbadians to be concerned that there is any intention or reckless attempt, as some in this chamber would have us believe, to be able to do harm to Barbadians. I think you have heard many honorable senators, Mr. President, speak about the outstanding job that Barbados has done under the leadership of Minister Bostic, the Minister of Health, and the Czar, Mr. Richard Carter, and others of the team in terms of helping Barbados get to where it is. I believe it is Senator Rogers that said that discipline has got us here. And I am sure that you know that if you know this government is not about to give up ground that it has worked so hard as a team to be able to build in terms of Barbados' recovery and being able to manage this pandemic and flatten the curve. So this country has witnessed us be responsible in the way that we have responded. We are not now about to just become irresponsible at this point, and to let you know that the protocols are in place. If we go to the GIS site, you will be able, that's the Government Information Service site, all of the protocols are there. And the orders are there as well. And one of the things that Barbados will recognize is that over the period of this pandemic, we have adjusted as we've needed. We have come up with new orders. We have increased the protocols, reduced them. We have made changes. And we have done that in consultation with all of the relevant stakeholders in so doing. And so I want to reassure this country that we will not fall back from that position at this point in time. We will continue to make sure that the health of this country is balanced by the economic interests that we also need to serve. Senator Nurse spoke. I'm really grateful to Senator Nurse for the points that he made, including commending the Prime Minister and her leadership. Senator Springer spoke about the opportunities for Barbadians that will redound, certainly from us having the kind of expertise here from digital nomads and others that will take up this opportunity. And Senator Cummings made a really important point. She made it clear that this is a tourism initiative and not necessarily an immigration initiative, and that we have to be able to separate that in our mind. If not, we will get ourselves confused in some of the arguments and in some of the fear that is being stirred up by those who might wish to distract us from what this really is. Senator Grant made an outstanding presentation, and he spoke about the balancing health and economics and about securing the future. One of the things he mentioned, which I also want to speak to, is about our need to strengthen our telecommunications even as we seek to welcome this. And I just want to take the opportunity to share that the Cabinet of Barbados has approved that quality of service standards be implemented in the area of telecommunications, not only in terms of technical standards, but equally in terms of customer service, customer service. And we are currently in the process of working with those in the telecommunications industry as well as the Fair Trading Commission to ensure that telecommunications treated as a utility will continue to be subject to regulations that we are developing, and we are also getting the support of the International Telecommunications Union in working with us on that. So letting you know, we are working on it. We are in the process of developing those standards that will help all of us to get a better quality of service, not just from a technical side, but equally from a customer service side. Senator Boyce spoke about monitoring and ensuring that those who come in do not run amok. And I want to say that there is a register of those persons who receive this 12-month stamp that will be kept by the Ministry of by the Immigration Department, and indeed through the double taxation agreements and other agreements that Barbados has with other countries around the world, in the event that there is a legal basis on which there is need for exchange of information. That information is being kept and being treated with respect for the privacy of others, but equally with responsibility for our obligations under treaties relating to exchange of information. So understand that we are not seeking to be any place for people to come hide away from the taxes. Equally, you will know that many countries were concerned about eroding their tax base. This does not erode anybody's tax base. In fact, people will continue to pay taxes in the respective countries. Mr. President, I believe that I have Senator Tate, who covered at the end. She spoke about her concerns that would have prompted the Tsar and others to give what she called a final warning. And I hope that in hearing this, you understand that this government of Barbados means business when it comes to looking after the safety and the livelihood and the lives, as you called it, of this country, of the people in this country. And indeed, I want to say that with regards to people flouted, the monitoring unit is doing its work, and people have the opportunity to report to the monitoring unit as well, should they see something. If you see something, say something. And that is about us all being our brother's keeper, as Senator Tate also pointed out. Mr. President, these are the bigger points that have been raised, and I hope that I have responded adequately to as many of them as possible. It is true, as Senator Rogers said, that discipline got us here, but you know what will take us the distance? Not only caution, but we have to balance that with daring, because we will not get out of this situation by being so afraid to do things that we end up doing nothing that is meaningful. We actually are going to have to look for courage, and we are going to have to tap into some daring at the same time that we are balancing caution, if indeed we are supposed to move forward. We have the opportunity with this remote work bill to embrace the world in the economic reinvigoration of this country. We believe, Mr. President, in the dignity of people, of all peoples, and as we go forward in the implementation of this bill, it is with respect for all people entering these shores, whether it's for tourism, for business, or other purposes, as we move forward. Now, we know remote working, sir, as I would have said at the beginning of my presentation earlier as I introduced the bill, that we have the studies, we have the research that shows that people are happier, they're more productive, and they're able to do more and save money in many cases for businesses and others as they work remotely. So whether we look at the business case, whether we look at the remote working perspective, whether we look at the tourism perspective, whatever perspective we look at for this bill, we see that indeed it is taking us in the right direction. And it is with these few words, Mr. President, that I beg to move that this bill again be read a second time.
The question is that this bill under consideration be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill, this bill in detail. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clauses 1 to 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 5 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 to 5 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 6 to 9.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 6 to 9 stand part.
The question is that clauses 6 to 9 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Passing it, say.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Remote Employment Act 2020.
Question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be cited as the Remote Employment Act 2020. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. And so the bill has been passed and will be cited as indicated, the Remote Employment Act 2020.
Mr. President, that concludes the government's business for today. I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn. Sign it aye. Oh,
Question?
Mr. President, 1 second, please.
Next Wednesday. Next week, Wednesday.
What's next week date? Next week?
Mr. President, I beg to move that the Senate do now
29th.
adjourn until next week, Wednesday, the 29th of July.
The question is that the Senate be now adjourned until next week, Wednesday, the 29th. Of July at 11:30 a.m. I must correct myself, until 11 o'clock. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. And we now stand adjourned until next week, Wednesday, the 29th, 11 a.m.